special. But one of the things that marks Disneyland out from every other theme park, apart from it being the first theme park, is who built it. The way that Walt would operate, essentially, was to look from within his own company and task people with doing things that maybe they didn't even know they could do themselves. Oh, hello.
Sorry. What's happened?
Wow.
Yeah, pardon me.
Fantastic. So yeah, it's funny, we think about, you might think about Walt Disney as being the kind of the guy who created Mickey Mouse, and it's true, and Walt Disney was an animator, but very quickly into his professional life, he stopped animating. You know, he was a cartoonist and he was an animator, but he didn't draw more or less from the start of the Disney Brothers cartoon studio. He had other people who did the animating. Walt's genius was in telling stories and in recognizing in people skills and abilities that they didn't even know they had themselves, and that he would task people to do things, and he would challenge people to do things that they didn't believe they could do, they didn't know they could achieve, but they wanted to please him. If you watch any interviews with people who worked for the company during that time, bless you, you will see that these people loved this man. You know, they treated him almost like a father, and they wanted to please him. And he would task them with doing things. That's exactly what he did with Disneyland. He started a company called WED, W-E-D, his initials, Walter Elias Disney. And it was a kind of an offshoot, and that company later became Walt Disney Imagineering, which is he invented that word, Imagineering, putting imagination and engineering together and coming up with something, with this, basically. Those people weren't theme park designers. They weren't attraction designers, because such a thing didn't exist. There were no theme parks. They were filmmakers. They were people who made, the people who made Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the people who made Pinocchio were the same people who made Disneyland. And thus Disneyland is, Walt himself said Disneyland is a show. In fact, Disneyland in many ways is a movie. And let me show you how Disneyland is a movie. So when you enter a movie theatre, when you first go into the movie theatre, there's nothing on the screen. You know, everything's blank, you're in a darkened theatre, it's all to come. Stand here and look, where's the castle? You can't see it. You can't see anything from outside. When you're standing outside Disneyland, you're in that darkened theatre. Then the lights come up, the curtains open, and the first thing that you see on the screen, all right, maybe now you see a load of adverts, but the first thing you see on the screen are the trailers. Walk through here and look at those attraction posters. They're the trailers these days, because now it's the kind of it's the convention for the trailers to be at the end of a movie. But actually, in the old days, in the old days of cinema, the trailers were at the start. So where are the trailers? Well, if you walk down Main Street and you look up, look at the windows. The windows on Main Street have a load of names on them. These are not all just gobbledygook names that are just made up. They're not all characters that are supposed to own the shops. They're actually the names of the Imagineers. The greatest accolade for anyone working in the Disney company is to be a Disney legend and to get a window on Main Street. All of those names above the windows on Main Street are the credits of the people who built Disneyland and the people who can't. Look straight down Main Street. Who do you see at the end? Sorry, I should have done that, because Disney people never point with one finger, they always point with two. Oh. You see Walt Disney, the director. The last credit you see before the film rolls is the director. There he is, Walt Disney. And then you're into the movie, into the whole movie theatre. Now, I mentioned Disneyland opened in the 1950s. Does anyone know when Disneyland opened? Yeah. Does anyone know the date?
19th of March.
No. You're shouting out random dates now.
December.
Sorry? No. It was the 17th of July 1955. It was the day that went down in Disney history as Black Sunday, because basically nothing worked. Well, things did work, but they were under huge pressure to get Disneyland finished. So it was a hot day in July. There were supposed to be, I think, 30,000, I think it was 30, it might have been 15,000 invited guests. The tickets had been counterfeited, so there were almost double that number of people in here. It was hot, the tarmac had just been laid. Remember that when people came to Disneyland in the 1950s, they didn't come dressed like this, like they've just been working on a building site, like all we look. They used to come dressed looking fancy. The ladies would come in their 1950s A-line dresses with their stilettos, and they would walk up Main Street, and ladies ladies' stiletto heels were sinking into the tarmac because it was melting. Just before the park opened, the plumbers came to Walt and they said, we've got a problem. You can either have drinking water or you can have toilets. We can't have both. So Walt wisely said, we can give people bottles of water, but we can't have people peeing in the street. So they had toilets. They got it opened. It wasn't a huge success on opening day. Well, it was a massive success in terms of its global reach. It was, the opening day of Disneyland was broadcast live. It was presented by a man called Bob Cummings, who you probably won't have heard of. It was presented also by a man that maybe some of you have heard of, because he went on to be quite, he was a film actor and he went on to be quite famous afterwards. His name was Ronald Reagan. He ended up being president of the United States. He was one of the presenters of the opening day of Disneyland. The main presenter was a guy called Art Linkletter, who was one of Walt Disney's great friends. And the whole telecast starts up there at the railroad station, and he said the words, I go when I say this. To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America.
And he goes on and he talks all about Disneyland, and essentially it's a very short speech, and if you want to read it, it's actually on a plaque just underneath the flag there on Main Street. But that, and then he invited chaplains from the Protestant, Catholic and Jewish faiths to open Disneyland. And from that moment, Disneyland took off.